Hello everyone. Ke Cyril Peterson hape, and today on our live stream we'll be having a discussion of some sorts, ne? And it's more like a lecture type of a thing. So I'll be sharing some concepts I believe has the potential of being really edifying and encouraging for someone. So I'm gonna get into the nitty-gritties now. I see some people are joining us. So ke tlo bua ka anxiety. I'll be sharing primarily ka anxiety, and before re tsenela a bit deeper, let me just have a time of worship just for 2 minutes, ne? Just for 2 minutes, fella. Let's just connect, man. We did this at the previous Nataf worship night, and yeah, I believe it can be a blessing to you. And just for 2 minutes, as we all gather our thoughts, and then we go deep into this thing.
Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him, there's no one. He is the only way. Oh, Jesus is for the world today. Above him there's no other. He is the only way. He is the answer for me and you today. Above him there's no other. Say Jesus is the way. He is the answer for the world today. Our Father, there's no one. Jesus is the only way. The way. When Karabo, what's his name? Kabelo Morok was talking, he brought it down to that as well. He went, but brought it down to that Jesus is the answer. The Bible says money answereth all things. It doesn't say money is the answer. So as you sing Jesus is the answer, we often, Bazalwane, engage worship.
Wasn't that edifying? And wasn't that awesome? So, Jesus indeed is the answer. He is the answer to the world today. He is the answer to the pandemic we are facing, and in all these things, we can just look unto the Master, look unto the King. And today, I want us to talk about something which is close to my heart, and we'll see how deep we can go. But when you read the Bible, many a times the Bible instructs us that we should be renewed in our minds. The Bible tells us, it says, be not conformed to this world, to the standard of this world, but be ye transformed by the renewal of the mind. So when our minds are renewed, transformation happens, So again, in the book of Philippians, it says the following. It says, be careful for nothing, but in all things by prayer and supplication, let your requests be made known unto God, and the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall garrison your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. And then it says the following, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. So it's not that speaking about the kind of things we should be thinking on. When we read our Bibles again, the book of Matthew, chapter number 6, we know that great discourse. Jesus says, consider the lily of the field, how it neither toils nor spins. Solomon, in all of his glory, he was not as well arrayed as one of these lilies. He says, look at the raven of the field, the birds of the air, etc. How they neither farm or prepare for tomorrow, but our Heavenly Father feeds them. They lack nothing. How much more for us? And then he says, take no thought about tomorrow. Take no thought about your raiment, what you shall wear, what you shall eat, etc. It even says, take no thought of your life. And then it says, for your Heavenly Father knows that you have need of all these things. I'm paraphrasing. And then it says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. My issue is here, what goes on in our minds, the worry and the anxiety which we have, because we suffer so much from worry, from anxiety, from all these things, and then God's people are just so heavily burdened. So I want us to just have a look at anxiety in the brain. What is the cause of anxiety? What is anxiety? And then where does all these things come from, and what does it mean? Because a lot of people, their biggest issue, the biggest mental illness, anxiety. It is by far the biggest mental illness, and or mental disorder, however you wanna put it, And I just want us to think, let's say one day you are driving to work, then suddenly you start thinking to yourself, did I turn off the stove? Or did I close the door? You are driving home, back from work. You begin to mentally trace your steps from earlier in that morning, but you still cannot remember turning the stove off, or you cannot remember locking the door. You probably did, but what if you didn't? Then your anxiety begins to build as the image of the stove catching on fire pops into your mind, or the image of the door swinging open and anybody being able just to enter into the house. As you muse and ponder on these things, anxiety is building. But as anxiety is building, just then, the person in the car right in front of you just stops, and then you slam onto your brakes. You clutch the steering wheel tightly, and then your brakes almost fail, and then you navigate yourself out of that situation, and you stop just in time. In this moment, your whole body is activated with a surge of energy, and your heart is pounding, but you're safe. You take deep breaths, and you think to yourself, that was close. So, anxiety, it seems, is all around us. If you carefully consider the events I just spoke about in the scenario I just gave, you'll notice that I was illustrating two types of anxiety, or two different ways that anxiety begins. The first way is through what we think about. The second way, it is through the reactions to our environment. And this is how anxiety begins. It begins by reactions to our environment and what we think about. And those things, they cause anxiety. This is because anxiety can be initiated by two different areas of the human brain, the cortex and the amygdala. So there are two different areas of the human brain, and that is the cortex and also the amygdala. This understanding, it is the result of years of research in a field called neuroscience, which is the science of the structure and function of the nervous system, including the brain, obviously. So, in the simple example given earlier, which involves both imagining the stove and breaking of the car, it illustrates the underlying principle of my talk today. The two separate ways in the brain, rather the two separate pathways in the brain, which can give rise to anxiety. And each pathway needs to be understood and treated for maximum relief. So in that example, anxiety was aroused in the cortex pathway by thoughts and images of the risks of leaving the stove on the whole day. So in the cortex, there are thoughts and images of leaving the stove on the entire day. And those thoughts and those images, they then trigger anxiety. This is cortex-based anxiety, based on the thoughts we are thinking, based on the prevailing thoughts in the mind of a person. And so, information from another anxiety-producing pathway, traveling directly through the amygdala, ensured quick reaction to avoid rear-end collision with another car. So everyone is capable of experiencing anxiety through both pathways. Anyone is. Some people might find it that their anxiety arises more frequently in one pathway than another. And as we'll discover in not so long, recognizing the two pathways and handling each in the most effective manner is essential. So you need to be able to identify how your anxiety is triggered and what pathway it is in order for you to adequately deal with that anxiety. The pathway is important. So now the purpose of our talk today is to explain the differences between the two pathways and demonstrate how anxiety is created in each, and to also give you practical ways to modify circuits in each pathway in order to make anxiety less of a burden in your life. So we'll show you how you can actually change the pathways in your brain so that they are less likely to create anxiety. We will do that. So anxiety is the complex emotional response that is similar to fear. Both arise from similar brain processes and cause similar physiological and behavioral reactions. Both originate in portions of the brain designed to help animals deal with danger. Fear and anxiety differ. However, fear is typically associated with a clear, present, and identifiable threat, whereas anxiety occurs in the absence of immediate peril. In other words, we feel fear when we are actually in trouble, like when a truck crosses the center line right towards us. We feel anxiety, however, when we have a sense of danger or dread of discomfort, but at the moment we are not currently in danger. So fear happens when the dread is imminent, whereas anxiety happens when there is a sense of a potential danger. So fear and anxiety, they differ in that sense. Fear, it is more that there is imminent danger right ahead of you, whereas anxiety, there is a potential of danger. There is also a sense of danger, but danger is not tangible yet. You understand? That is the underlying difference between anxiety and fear. Now, everyone experiences fear and anxiety, and events can cause us to feel in danger, such as when a severe storm shakes our house, or when we see a strange dog running towards us. Anxiety arises when we worry about the safety of a loved one who is far from home. Maybe you've got a loved one in Italy right now, or a loved one in the States or in UK, and you are worried about them because of the pandemic, because of all the things which are happening because of the coronavirus. Potentially they're in danger, and potentially maybe they're not in danger. So this is what gives rise to anxiety. So many people feel anxious quite often, especially when under some kind of stress. Problems begin, however, when anxiety interferes with important aspects of our lives. So Anxiety in itself is not necessarily bad, but anxiety becomes bad when it begins to interfere with certain aspects of our life. Anxiety becomes a problem when we can no longer live life normally anymore and anxiety begins to cripple us. So, in that case, we would need to get a handle on our anxiety and regain control. We need to understand how to deal with it so as it no longer limits our lives. Anxiety can limit people's lives in surprising ways, many of which may not seem to be due to anxiety. I hope you don't mind. I'm having some hot chocolate. Amen. For example, some people may feel plagued by worries that haunt them at every waking moment. Others might find it difficult to fall asleep. Yes, sometimes your sleeplessness, insomnia, can be due to anxiety. Yes, it can. Some may have a hard time leaving home, while for others, a fear of public speaking may even threaten their job. A new mother might have a complete series of rituals for hours each morning before she can leave her child with a babysitter. A teenage boy may be haunted by nightmares and get suspended for fighting in school after his home has been destroyed by a fire or a tornado or some other natural disaster. A plumber's anxiety about encountering large spiders may reduce his income to a level that won't support his family. A child may be reluctant to attend school and unwilling to talk to her teachers, threatening her education. Even though anxiety has the power to rob a person of the capacity to complete many of the basic activities of life, all of these individuals can return to fully engaging in life. They can understand the cause of their difficulties and begin to find confidence again. This understanding is possible thanks to a recent revolution in knowledge about the brain structures that create anxiety. So particularly in the past two decades, research on neurological underpinnings of anxiety has been conducted in a variety of laboratories around the world. Research on animals has uncovered new details about the neurological functions of fear, structures in the brain such that detect threats and initiate protective responses have been identified. At the same time, new technologies like functional magnetic resonance imaging and positron emission tomography scans such have provided detailed information about how the human brain responds in a variety of situations. When reviewed, analyzed and combined, this emerging knowledge allows neuroscientists to make connections between animal research and human research. As a result, they are now able to assemble a clear picture of the causes of fear and anxiety, providing an understanding that surpasses our understanding of all other human emotions. This research has revealed something very important. Two fairly separate pathways in the brain can create anxiety. One path begins in the cerebral cortex, the large, convoluted gray part of the brain, and it involves our perceptions and thoughts about situations. The other travels more directly through the amygdala, two small almond-shaped structures, one on each side of the brain. So there are two parts of the brain. It is the cortex, the cerebral cortex, and the amygdala. The cerebral cortex is the gray matter, the wrinkled and convoluted part. And within that, there is another smaller part, like an almond, called the amygdala. Amygdala is the Greek word for almond. So the amygdala triggers the ancient fight or flight response, which has been passed down virtually unchanged from the earliest vertebrates of the earth. So now, both pathways play a role in anxiety. Although some types of anxiety are more associated with the cortex, while others can be directly attributed to the amygdala. In psychotherapy for anxiety, attention has typically been focused on the cortex pathway, using therapeutic approaches that involve changing thoughts and arguing logically against anxiety. However, a growing body of research suggests that the role of the amygdala must also be understood to develop a more complete picture of how anxiety is created and how it can be controlled. So in our talk today, we're going to explore pathways to give you a full picture of anxiety and how to change it, whatever its origin. So there are two things. It is the cortex and the amygdala. So chances are you're already familiar with the cortex. You should be familiar with the cortex. Get the portion of the brain that fills the topmost part of the skull. It's the thinking part of the brain. Some say it's the portion of the brain that makes us human because it enables us to reason, to think, to create language, to engage in complicated thinking such as logic, mathematics, music, etc. Species that have a large cerebral cortex are more often thought to be more intelligent than other animals. Approaches to treating anxiety that target the cortex pathway are numerous and typically focus on cognition. The psychological term for the mental processes that most people refer to as thinking. So thoughts originating in the cortex may be the cause of anxiety, or they may have the effect of increasing or decreasing anxiety. In many instances, changing our thoughts can help us prevent our cognitive processes from initiating or contributing to anxiety. Until recently, treatments for anxiety were less likely to take the amygdala pathway into consideration. The amygdala is small, but is made up of thousands of circuits of cells dedicated to different purposes. These circuits influence love, bonding, sexual behavior, anger, aggression, fear. The role of the amygdala is to attach emotional significance to situations and objects to form emotional memories. I'll repeat that. The role of the amygdala is to attach emotional significance to situations or objects and to form emotional memories. These emotions and emotional memories can be positive or negative. We'll focus on the way the amygdala attaches anxiety to experiences and creates anxiety-producing memories. This will help you understand the amygdala so that you can learn how to change its circuitry and minimize anxiety. So we as people unconsciously aware of the way the amygdala attaches anxiety to situations or objects, just as we unconsciously aware of how the liver aids digestion. However, the amygdala's emotional processing has profound effects on our behavior. As we'll discuss today, the amygdala is at the very heart of where the anxiety response is produced. Although the cortex can initiate or even contribute to anxiety, the amygdala is required to trigger the anxiety response. This is why a thorough approach to addressing anxiety requires dealing with both the cortex pathway and the amygdala pathway. So we're gonna go deeper into this. I know I sound a bit scientific today and stuff like that. But like I said, it is more like a lecture, and I hope you are following with me, and I hope I'm not leaving anyone behind. So let me put it like this. We need to understand how anxiety limits you in your life. At its very best, anxiety can help us stay alert and focused. It can get our hearts pounding and give us the extra adrenaline we need to win a race or to avoid a deadly situation. At its worst, however, it can wreak havoc with our lives and even paralyze us to the point of inaction. So now, if you suffer from anxiety, especially an anxiety disorder, you know how disabling it can be. However, ridding yourself of all anxiety isn't a realistic goal. and it's not only impossible but unnecessary. Ne? For some people, the fear of flying severely limits their career, but others can easily avoid air travel for an entire lifetime with few consequences. So in such a case, the fear of flights is not really a limiting issue. If you focus your attention on the anxiety reactions that frequently or severely interfere with your ability to live your life in the way that you desire, you'll be on the right track. So, we're gonna go through that, and hopefully we will help you to understand how anxiety in the brain works. Hopefully we'll be able to understand that. And I hope that this talk is not so confusing to many. I see a lot of you are online. Let me just wave to you guys. We're gonna drop some knowledge today. It's not so much preaching, but more of dropping some knowledge. I hope you guys can hear me and are flowing with me. And so now we wanna go into I wanna tell you about the brain. Practical information that will illuminate the causes of anxiety and help you understand how to change your brain to decrease your experience of anxiety. So it won't be so detailed and technical of all the neurological processes, but instead we will provide you with a simplified and basic explanation of anxiety in the brain that can help you understand why certain strategies will help you control your anxiety. So we need to revisit the two pathways. I've spoken about it a bit in detail, and now we're gonna delve into it. We need to revisit the two pathways to anxiety. So if you don't know what causes your anxiety, you are at a disadvantage when you try to change it. Anxiety is created by the brain and wouldn't occur without the contributions of specific brain areas. And while the brain is a very complex interconnected system, much of which remains a mystery, we can identify two general sources of anxiety. There are also techniques you can use to target these specific sources of anxiety that will help you be more effective in managing or preventing the anxiety that you feel. As mentioned in my introduction, the main sources of anxiety in the brain are two pathways that can initiate an anxiety response. The cortex pathway is the one most people think of when they consider the causes of anxiety. You will learn much more about the human cerebral cortex in my later videos. For now, we'll simply say that the cortex is the pathway of sensations, thoughts, logic, imagination, intuition, conscious memory, and planning. Anxiety treatment typically targets this pathway. And what pathway is that? It's the pathway of sensations, of thoughts, of logic, of imagination, of intuition, of conscious memory, and planning. So anxiety treatment that targets this pathway probably because it's a more conscious pathway, meaning that we tend to be more aware of what's happening in this pathway and have more access to what this part of the brain is remembering and focusing on. So now if you find that your thoughts keep turning to ideas or images that increase your anxiety, or that you obsess over doubts, become preoccupied with worries, or get stuck in trying to think of solutions to problems, you are probably experiencing cortex-based anxiety. Amygdala pathway, on the other hand, can create the powerful physical effects that anxiety has on the body. The amygdala's numerous connections to other parts of the brain allow you to mobilize a variety of bodily reactions very quickly in less than the 10th of a second. The amygdala can provide a surge of adrenaline, increase blood pressure and heart rate, create muscle tension, and more. The amygdala pathway doesn't produce thoughts that you are aware of. It operates more quickly than the cortex can. Therefore, it creates many aspects of an anxiety response without your conscious knowledge or control. Like a panic attack. A panic attack happens out of nowhere. You don't think about it, it just happens. Suddenly your heart is racing. You understand? That is amygdala based. It is amygdala based. So if you feel like your anxiety has no apparent cause and doesn't make logical sense, you are usually experiencing the effects of anxiety arising from the amygdala pathway. Your awareness of the amygdala is likely to be based on your experience of its effects on you, namely bodily changes, nervousness, wanting to avoid a certain situation, or having aggressive impulses. Therapists, unfortunately, don't discuss the amygdala when treating anxiety disorders, which is surprising given that most experiences of fear, anxiety, or panic arise due to involvement of the amygdala. Even when the cortex is the source of anxious thinking, it's the amygdala that causes the physical sensations of anxiety to occur. Pounding heart, perspiration, muscle tension, and so on. However, when family doctors and psychiatrists are prescribing medications to reduce anxiety, they are often focused on the amygdala, even though they may not mention it by name. Such tranquilizing medications are very effective at quickly reducing anxiety. Unfortunately, however, they do not change the circuitry of the amygdala. So while they reduce the anxiety response, they don't help change the amygdala in ways that would be beneficial in the long run. So, let me put it like this. The amygdala has many functions that are not related to anxiety. And we won't delve into them here. Rather, let me do this. Let me show you an image of the brain. Can you see a picture of the brain right now? Hopefully showing on your screen. We're seeing the cortex, we're seeing the thalamus, we're seeing the hypothalamus, we're seeing the amygdala, and we're also seeing the hippocampus. So, there are two types of anxiety. Like I said, there are two types of anxiety. Cortex-based anxiety and amygdala-based anxiety. Let me show you those two aspects of the brain again. So, the big part, the gray matter, that is the cortex. That is cortex-based anxiety. And there is a small part right next to the hypothalamus called the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is what we'll be looking more into today. Now, we'll be looking more into the amygdala. Are you still with me, guys? I'm not too technical. Have one more look at that image, and then we're gonna dissect this thing, We're gonna dissect this thing. Have one more look at the amygdala. Can you see it? So, now where was I? Okay, this slide, I just closed it. Let me try to reopen this slide. Okay, I'll get back to it. It's fine. So, the amygdala, like I said, has many functions which are not related to anxiety. And we won't delve into them today. So, to understand the amygdala's role in anxiety, it's important to know that as you go about your day, the amygdala notices sounds, sights, and events, even though you may not be consciously focused on them. The amygdala is on the lookout for anything that might indicate potential harm. That's what the amygdala does. It is on the lookout for anything that might indicate potential harm. And this is happening subconsciously. You are not aware of this process happening. If it detects potential danger, it sets off the fear response, an alarm in the body that protects us by preparing us to fight or flee. Consider it this way, in a more scientific approach. We are the descendants of frightened people. Early humans whose amygdala reacted to potential dangers and produced a strong fear response were most likely to behave in cautious ways and to be protective of their children, which meant that they were more likely to survive and pass their genes and frightened amygdala onto future generations. Remember, we're to survive against lions and predators and stuff like that out in the wild. Before the onset of all these things. Someone is calling me at the worst possible time. I'm dropping it. And so we need to consider this. Ne? So early humans whose amygdala reacted to potential dangers and produced a strong fear response were most likely to behave in a cautious way. Ne? But on the other hand, early humans who were way too calm to worry about, say, whether a lion was nearby or whether a river looked like it would flood their dwelling place, were less likely to survive and pass on their genes. So through evolution and all those things, ne, I don't believe in evolution, by the way. I'm just speaking in a more scientific term. Ne? I believe in macroevolution, ne, which is observable, which is change over time. Ne? Story for another day. So humans living today are descendants of people whose amygdalas produced very effective fear responses. So now having a protective, fear-producing amygdala is nearly universal among humans. It isn't surprising, therefore, that anxiety disorders are the most common mental disorder people experience, affecting approximately 40 million adults. In the US, for example. Ne? And I take this research from Kessa et al. 2005. Ne? You can go and check it. So, given that the daily dangers in our lives have been reduced tremendously since prehistoric times, you may wonder why so many people are experiencing anxiety-based problems. Ne? Unfortunately, the amygdala is still operating on the lessons it learned in prehistoric times. It still considers us to be potential prey for other animals or humans. It assumes that the best response to danger is running, fighting, or freezing. And it prepares the body to initiate these responses, whether they are appropriate or not. But these fear responses don't fit the 21st century situations that most people live in. And they don't help us in the way they once did. For instance, people seem to be predisposed to fear snakes, spiders, and heights, rather than cars, guns, and electrical outlets, even though these can be more deadly than the former. In addition, it also seems that people's brains are more susceptible to this fear response, whether due to genetics or living through traumatic experiences. So now, when you look into the anatomy of anxiety, I'm going to show you something now. When you're looking at the anatomy of anxiety, do you see this pathway I'm showing you? It is the two neural pathways of anxiety. It is sensory information, the thalamus, going to the cortex, amygdala, and then we have the anxiety response. So all that I'm talking about today, it is based on this pathway. Okay, so I need you to imagine this pathway. I need you to imagine this pathway as I elucidate. And I think I'll take maybe 10 more minutes and wrap it up at that. And then I will continue with this lecture maybe later tonight or tomorrow morning. And let's have a podcast. Let's drop some knowledge, Let's have deep thoughts. You understand? And I'll also be answering questions. I will allow you to comment with your issues, and then we can analyze them, and talk about how you can deal with anxiety. Maybe it's a fear of heights, maybe it's claustrophobia, whatever it can be, and then we'll see how we can help each other. And then we'll have a nice talk show. So now, looking into the anatomy of anxiety, and looking into this anatomy, neuroscience involves the study of the development, structure, and function of the nervous system, including the brain. So in order to explain the neuroscience of anxiety, we need to provide you with a how can I put it? Sekgowa is running away. With a concise description of the anatomy of the brain, especially of the cortex. Pardon me a bit. Especially of the cortex and the amygdala. So now, having a grasp of how these important regions of the brain operate and the ways in which they relate to one another will help you understand what happens when the cortex or amygdala overreacts and creates anxiety. This basic knowledge of neuroscience will provide you with insight on how you can rewire your brain to resist anxiety. So let's look at the cortex pathway. Let's look at the cortex pathway. And I'm gonna put the image up again. So I'll be explaining this image. So you won't see my pretty face again. You'll be looking at that image as I explain that image. Yeah, so focus on the image. There goes the image right now. Aha. So we'll start with the cortex pathway, because when people talk about the brain, they usually picture the wrinkled gray outer layer of the brain, known as the cerebral cortex. The cortex, the source of many of the human race's most impressive abilities. But as we'll explain, these abilities also result in the cortex being capable of creating a great deal of anxiety. So I want you to imagine these things as you go through and through. So now, here is the cortex. Here is an image of the cortex. I see a lot of people joining our talk. Welcome, guys. Nice to see you. I hope you're enjoying this. I hope I'm not too deep. If I'm not too deep, someone type, "You're not too deep, man of God. Continue." I hope I'm not too complex. So now, as you can see, the image here is an image of the cortex and the thalamus. And so the cerebral cortex, in humans, the cortex is larger and has more developed abilities than those of other animals. It's divided into two halves, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. Furthermore, it's divided into different sections called lobes that have different functions, such as processing vision, hearing, and other sensory information, and putting it together to allow you to perceive the world. So it puts all these things together so that you are able to perceive the world. So the cortex is the perceiving and thinking part of the brain, the part you are using to listen and to read what I'm showing you right now, and to meditate on what I'm saying. Get the part which allows you to do that. You understand? So now, in addition to providing insights, sounds, and other perceptions, the cortex also attaches meaning and memories to those perceptions. Do you see that? The cortex, it allows you, it attaches meaning and memories to those perceptions. So now the perceptions you have memories attached to them. So you don't just see an old man and hear his voice. Rather, you recognize him as your grandfather and understand the specific meaning of the sounds he's making. And beyond providing you with the ability to understand and interpret situations, the cortex allows you to use logic, reasoning, and produce language, use your imagination, and plan ways of responding to situations. The cortex can also contribute to changing your responses. Let me show it to you again. The cortex, what I'm talking about. It also allows you ways to change your responses to threatening situations, which is key when dealing with anxiety. The cortex is capable of evaluating the usefulness of various responses to the dangers you face. Thanks to the influence of your cortex, you can decide not to physically fight your boss if you feel you are in danger of being fired, or choose not to turn away when you hear exploding fireworks. In fact, by listening to me right now, you are doing the very same thing, actively using your cortex to find different ways to cope with anxiety. So the cortex pathway, let me show it to you now. The cortex pathway, where is the pathway? Yes, there it is. So the cortex pathway to anxiety begins with your sense organs, your eyes, ears, nose, taste buds, even your skin are all sources of information about the world. All of your knowledge of the world has come through your sense organs and has been interpreted by different parts of your cortex. When information comes in through your sense organs, it's directed to the thalamus. Can you see it in this image? It is directed to your thalamus. So when information, so now did you get what I was just showing you now? Sorry, I went to the wrong one. So I was just telling you about the sensory information. Ne? So now this sensory information I just highlighted above. Ne? Like I'm gonna drop some knowledge now. Ne? So now the sensory information I provided above, it goes into the thalamus. Ne? The sensory information goes into the thalamus. Ne? And here is the thalamus. So the sensory information, ne, your eyes, ears, nose, taste buds, even your skin, ne, they go through a thalamus. And all of your knowledge of the world has come through your sense organs and been interpreted by different parts of your context. When information comes in through your sense organs, it is directed to the thalamus, which is like the grand central station, ne, or park central station, or park station of the brain. Ne? So the thalamus is a central relay station that sends. Let me show it to you again. I think now I need to show you the image of the thalamus again. Ne? This is the thalamus underneath the cortex. Get the thalamus. Ne? So now the thalamus is a central relay station that sends signals from your eyes, ears, and so on to the cortex. When information comes into the thalamus, it is sent out to the various lobes to be processed and interpreted. Then the information travels to other parts of the brain, including the frontal lobes, ne, which is behind the forehead, where the information is put together so that you can perceive and understand the world. Ne? So, it is sensory information, thalamus, then cortex. You get that? Sensory information, thalamus, then cortex. So now the information is then rerouted to the cortex. The cortex, that's where your thoughts are, that's where your reasoning is, and then in the cortex it is processed, ne? And then thoughts happen. Ne? And then thoughts happen. Now in the cortex there is a part called the frontal lobes. Now the frontal lobes are one of the most important parts of the cortex to understand. They are located directly behind the forehead and eyes. They are the largest set of lobes in the human brain. They are much larger than the frontal lobes of most other animals. The frontal lobes receive information from all the other lobes and put it together to allow us to respond to an integrated experience of the world. The frontal lobes are said to have executive function, meaning that they are where the supervision of many brain processes occurs. So many brain processes are supervised and they happen right here in the cortex. And so I'm aware that I'm saying a lot of things, and I wanna pause it here, so that you can process all that I was saying. You can process it and then look through this video again. And then I will go live again, and then when I go live I'll be more interactive, and you can ask me questions, and then I will address them, and we're gonna go a little bit deeper with this, because I'm aware that those who are suffering from anxiety, times like these can be trying times, can be troublesome times. And also share biblical therapy, how pastors can help their congregants deal with anxiety. So guys, there is too much power, and we will go into this and talk more. Watch out for more of our videos, and please do share this. Leave me your questions, your comments down below, so that I can see them, and then attend to them. Sure.